Hey there everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Today I've got a quick update on the FCC's broadband maps, which are critical for the Biden infrastructure bill and for any funds to be released for that. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Sequorum, Broadband Deployment News. So one of the things that is a known issue with broadband funds and deployment is the fact that the maps that we have that say who has broadband and who doesn't have not been accurate. And this goes back to how we've been doing maps in the past for funding programs like CAF2 and RDOF, where the FCC had maps and they were getting the data from the FCC's 477 forms, which basically was a form that said to a service provider they would report if they were providing broadband service in a particular census block. And if they were, that was counted. And that could be just one customer. Probably not just one customer. I mean, it could be, I guess, if they were kind of on the fringe of an area. But in general, if they were reporting just one customer, or let's say just a small percentage of that census block, half that census block, whatever, then it was considered that that whole census block was served. So it could be that most of the people in that census block did not have what qualifies as broadband as far as the FCC goes, which currently is 25 by 3. And those are the speeds that for CAF2 and RDOF were assigned as far as 25 by 3. That's what had to be hit. Now for the IIJA, served and underserved have slightly different definitions. Underserved would be anything that's under 100 by 20, and unserved is anything that's under 25 by 3. So again, we've got these maps, and the FCC's data would show that this census block was served, at least let's say over 25 by 3, when a lot of people in that area did not have it. So back in March of 2019, the Broadband Data Act passed, and that requires the FCC to come up with better maps for these funding programs. Unfortunately, in that act, there was no funding for that. So it specifically said they could not use funds from USAC, which is the Universal Service Administration Corporation. And USAC is what manages the USF funds, the Universal Service Fund. So that's the only funding that the FCC had available to it was through USAC, and this particular Broadband Data Act said they could not use the funds from that. So again, this passed back in March of 2019. March of 2020, but there was no ability or funding for them to do that. So the FCC kept pushing for that, and then finally in December of 2021, with the coronavirus relief package, they got, I think, about $7 to $8 billion to be able to improve these maps. So since December of last year, of 2021, now I'm getting my dates mixed up. Sorry, it's December 2020. You see what a pandemic does. So it was March 9, 2019. And then December 2020 is when that coronavirus bill passed. So all this time now, the FCC's had that money and have been doing what they could to improve these maps, but there's a lot of work that's got to be done. And then in November 15th, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was signed into law by the president, and that requires also that these broadband maps be in place before any funds can be allocated. So that's always been a question. So as far as timelines go, in the IIJA, the NTIA, that's the National Telecommunications Administration, NTIA anyway, that's them. So that agency has until May roughly this year, because they have a 6-month period where they have to get out their notice of funding opportunities. They could get out earlier, but they have at least 6 months where they're supposed to get that out. It could actually take longer. There's nothing in there that says it couldn't take longer. So there's a 6-month clock that's going. And then you've got the broadband maps. Well, the question has been, how long is that going to take? They've had time working on it. So when will it be out? When will it be out? Or when will they be out? I don't know if it'll be one map or a couple of different kinds of maps. So we got a little bit of hint of that from a hearing that the Commerce Secretary was in, Gina Raimondo. So I'm going to read a little bit of this and kind of gives us hints. So Commerce's Gina Raimondo on broadband billions, maps before money. And again, this is a requirement. So before any money, certainly for broadband buildings or build outs, I should say, is sent out from the NTIA, then these maps have to be in place. So Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo staked out and spelled out the Biden administration's ambitious goal for the $65 billion Infrastructure Act investment in broadband. a goal that will depend on the FCC coming up with these better broadband availability maps. And by the way, I did a broadcast on this back I think when back in December of 2020 or shortly after, when the FCC went ahead and asked for comments on these maps. I went ahead and did a broadcast and explained a lot about that. So I'll go ahead and link to that in the comments section so that you can, if you want to know more about what the FCC is working on and what some of the requirements are going to be, especially if you're a service provider, because there are going to be requirements as service providers, then you can go ahead and check that out. So I'll link to that in the comments when I'm done here. In testimony at a Senate Appropriations Commerce Subcommittee oversight hearings, that's where she talked about this. Subcommittee Chair Gina Raimondo, Democrat from New Hampshire, shared a common concern of both Democrats and Republicans over handing out those billions. The FCC's underwhelming maps showing where broadband currently is and isn't. And again, as I described, that's the problem. Raimondo agreed that the maps are vital, and for those concerned about overbuilding, she said the explicit mission is to prioritize unserved. She said at the end of this, shame on me if there's a single unserved person left. So the goal is to try to roll out broadband to everybody who doesn't have it. And again, the FCC definition right now is 25 by 3, but in the IIJA and the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program portion of that, the 42.5 billion or so money, then really the goal there is to have people, if they're going to be doing an unserved or underserved project, what they really want to be shooting for is 100 by 100. But again, if it's less than 100 by 20, it's considered underserved, and if it's less than 25 by 3, it's considered unserved. But everyone's supposed to sign up for at least 100 symmetrical if they're going to be using the funds for that. So they're really trying to make that fiber. She also said Commerce can't deploy any of the money without accurate maps. Again, they can't do that. She said it was the purview of the FCC, but that Commerce was in constant communication with the FCC, including a personal meeting with FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel. So this is the FCC that's putting the maps together. It's not the Commerce Department, because the FCC was tasked with this, and that was part of the Broadband Data Act. But she's saying she's been in contact with the FCC on this. Raimondo said she was at least confident that there will be an improvement on the past maps, which were by census tract, but the new data drills down to the household. So it's kind of good news, and I don't know, she doesn't sound real confident that they'll have everything that they want to have in those maps, but at least it'll be by household, and that's really the key, is that you'll be able to go to the map, type in an address, and see what's supposedly there. And really what you're supposed to be able to see is the speed that's available there, maybe whatever providers there are, as well as latency. So there's supposed to be, I think, some testing going on that's showing what the latency is. So not only what a service provider is advertising, but actual speeds. So that's all what's supposed to be happening. Now, I don't know if that's going to be possible in the time frame to get all of that done, and maybe that's what she's hinting at here. So she's saying, hopefully, at the very least, you'll be able to go and type in an address and get some data about that address. Our goal at the Commerce Department, she told the committee, is to make certain that at the end of our work, every single household, small business, farm, family, and student in America has access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband. Price and quality of broadband service have been factored into the Biden administration definition of where broadband is not available, which has concerned ISPs who fear it will be used to overbuild existing service rather than first focused on where broadband is not available, period. So, and that has been the concern, is that all this money is going to be out there, and they want to make sure that if somebody's providing a good broadband service in an area, maybe they do have 100 by 20 available in that area, that you don't then give money to somebody else to overbuild in that area. And there are some concerns about changes that were made to ARPA, where there's a lot more flexibility on how those funds can be awarded. Even if somebody's providing, let's say, 100 by 20, ARPA, the latest or final rules said, well, somebody could be providing that, but if you have evidence that that's not really the case, in other words, if you do a survey of people and they're not happy, then you have some flexibility and leeway to overbuild there. So there's nothing about that in this bill, but that's one of the concerns that people have. So in here, I skipped by it where she said it, but basically she said summer. She said, was it in here? Okay, yeah. Raimondo said that the FCC has indicated that by summer they expect to have the improved maps. So what is summer? So the notice of funding opportunity is supposed to be out mid-May based on the 6-month clock that started when the bill was signed in mid-November. Summer could be June, July, August, I guess, but no funds can go out until these new maps are available. But hopefully, with all the time that the FCC has had to work on this, that will be possible. Now, there is also, unfortunately, there's this challenge process that's going to have to take place. So once the maps go out there, then service providers can challenge that and say, wait a minute, you've got this particular plot of ground listed as unserved, and we are actually providing service there. So, there'll be that challenge process. They're going to have to go back and forth. And I believe there'll be a challenge process from consumers as well. So this map is going to be open to consumers and service providers as well. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I have a comment here. Ross says, I'm really excited to see latency. My node was supposed to be split, and we're having 400 millisecond ping spikes every night. Yeah, so that is important. So latency is important, especially even more so now as the applications on the internet are changing, and there's different technology that are coming out that are low latency. 5G actually has very low latency. And then there's DOCSIS, low latency DOCSIS that's coming out that's going to be used. And of course, fiber in general has low latency. Low Earth orbit satellites are actually pretty reasonable on latency right now. They're just slightly over what most fixed providers are at latency. But yeah, if you're having 400 millisecond ping times, that's not good, especially if you're doing gaming or something like that. And latency can also impact things like voice service and some other things. I guess jitter as well on something like that. So. As far as past funding opportunities with CAF2 and RDOF, those have latency requirements built in as well. And with CAF2, there are required testing that has to be done. And I believe RDOF is going to be doing the same thing. The RDOF funds are just now getting ready to be released. But in those cases, a service provider that gets those funds has to set up a certain percentage of customers in an area at different speeds. And then they have to test that. I think it's once a quarter. They have to test and get actual latency results, and then that has to be reported back to the FCC. So latency is important as well as speeds. So the good news is that it does look like there will be some progress, or that hopefully there will be a map in place at some point where these funds will be able to be released. But again, there's a lot of things that have to go through, and I don't believe that really there will be any funds released from this program until probably early 2023, and that's because of the timeline of the notice of funding opportunity getting out, and then you've got that just basically gives the states all the information they need. Then the states have to get with the subgrantees, and there's all of that work that's got to take place. There's applications that have got to go back in from the subgrantees to the states, back to the NTIA. There's got to be a lot that's going to be in that process, plus the mapping. So, but it does sound like the mapping, I think, we'll be making good progress during that. So here's an update for you. Hopefully this was helpful. Hey, William Baker, how are you? Will Baker is on. Good to see you, Will. So thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, go ahead and give me a thumbs up on the video. And if you would, click subscribe and click the little notification bell if you would like to get notified whenever I'm live. And I'm live every day with Broadband Deployment News. So I will see you next time. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.